So, without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to Charles Leach, my fellow Semiofest team member, and he's a partner at ABM, and he's going to introduce our first keynote speaker, Marcel Danesi.
It is my tremendous honor and privilege to introduce our very first keynote speaker for Semiofest 2017, Marcel Danesi. Yeah, are you ready for this? It's a privilege, but of course it's also a terrible burden, because if anybody satisfied the definition of somebody who needed no introduction, particularly for this crowd, it would be Marcel. So instead of giving you any kind of real background, because I know you know basically all about Marcel, I had to actually explain the idea of Marcel to somebody who knew nothing about him at all, at a dinner party we had last weekend. And I realized that the best way to do that was to say that Marcel was the Bill Murray of the semiotics world. Yes? Living legend, very prolific, modest, self-effacing, lovely guy, tremendous sense of humor, but kind of unpredictable, but in the best possible way. So without further ado, please welcome our keynote speaker, Marcel Danesi.
After that introduction, I really can't wait to hear what I'm going to say, honestly. Ooh. Whoa. I'm the first talk at the conference. You know how much pressure that is? I'm going to try my best. It is a privilege to be here. It really, really is. Thank you, Charles and the gang. And of course, nice to see Chris Arning, where it all started in my classroom, didn't it, Chris? It's kind of nice. And I don't use technology. I'm talking about the age of McLuhan, and I do not use technology. How does that figure? Well, let me tell you perhaps why I don't, and it's relevant to my talk. One day in class, I decided, okay, it's about a couple of years ago, I'm going to use PowerPoint. To me, that's advanced technology. So I start using it for a week. After a week, a student comes up to me and says, "Professor, do you mind going back and doing what you used to do before?" So I started to think that maybe old-fashioned is new-fashioned, that life is cyclical. And that's exactly McLuhan's message. And where did he get it from? I know you're not going to believe it. I'm Danesi, right? You're going to get it from an Italian, right? Well, he did. And that Italian was a philosopher named Giambattista Vico. And in fact, with his son, posthumously, he published a book called The Laws of Media with University of Toronto Press. And he does admit it at the beginning of there that he got most of his ideas of the cycle, of how the body finds itself into symbolism, how it extends, amplifies the human organism on beyond that. So I'm going to be talking about McLuhan in an age where absolutely everything has amplified us. Our objects have done that. And I'm going to use a notion by a student. And she's not here, unfortunately. Stephanie Welsh-Matthews. She came up with the notion of semiotic fitness. And I discovered this notion at a talk she gave at an institute at the University of Toronto in the fall. And I said, how appropriate this is in the age of McLuhan. Are we semiotically fit today? In other words, if semiosis, the production and use of signs, is bodily based, and if our body has been, I don't know, diffused into cyberspace, are we something else? Are we semiotically fit? I'm going to put it in this form, and I will, like a riddle, I will try to provide an answer at the end. But in order to do that, I need a bit of an excursion. I need to go into what semiotic fitness is and what I mean by the age of McLuhan. Yeah, I did coin that phrase, the unwitting semiotician. McLuhan didn't have a theory. I remember at one of the conferences that I actually chaired. Chomsky was at it, Piaget. Can you imagine? I was chairing it. And someone in the audience said, but you have no theories. And he says, oh, I got lots of those. Which one do you want? And, you know, in a way, that's semiotics, isn't it? It's not a theory. It is a, well, Charles Peirce called it a doctrine, a set of principles that we use. And I really, really love this idea of using semiotics at events like this, rather than among semioticians. Nothing more boring in my life than to talk about Charles Peirce and his 66 species of signs. Stop it already. I actually also like the wonderful series at Bloomsbury, done by my colleague Paul Buisac, who shows that semiotics is everywhere. And he's the one that defines semiotics as everything that is interesting. Okay, what is semiotic fitness? You know I take things seriously when I'm reading. I don't usually read. I usually wing it. But in this case, I'm really taking this thing very seriously. The semiotic animal developed a need for meaning in its life. I don't know if cats have meaning. I'm going to take it back because they might. I'm never going to make any other comment about other species because I come out of it from a biosemiotic perspective, and my late dear friend, colleague, Tom Sebiok, always did that. But I'll never do that again because one day in class, I made this statement. I said, you know, what distinguishes cats from humans is perhaps that cats do not paint. Well, the next day, someone came to class with a picture book of paintings. He says, look at these. He says, marvelous. It looks like Kandinsky gone crazy. She said, it's done by a cat. Okay. But randomly, no, this cat, they would put colors in front of it. It would use only the ones that it felt it needed. Well, that shows some intentionality. Then I discovered that, heavens, elephants do as well. I also discovered recently that ants, a species of ants, is able to solve the 3-disc version of the Tower of Hanoi puzzle. What? What's going on here? So I'm going to take it back. But I can pretty well be sure to say that meaning may not be in the same human sense in other species. And that's what defines semiotic fitness, according to Stephanie. We have developed, it's unwitting, it's unconscious, a constant need to say, this has some meaning for us. And by the way, who knows what the word meaning means? In 1922, in a marvelous book called The Meaning of Meaning by Osgood, and I forget the other one now, it's hard to say what we mean by meaning, but it's everywhere. In fact, we cannot define it. To be fit, according to this model by Stephanie, is that when information comes in, and we get a lot of information, we need to have the cognitive tools to interpret it, not just take it in. This is a biosemiotic notion, by the way. It comes from a biologist, 1909, who wrote, I forget the title, but Biology of Species. His name was Jacob von Uexküll, who said that every species is designed to take in a certain kind of information and model it and use it for survival. But the human species adds a layer to it that's probably not there anywhere else. It interprets it and makes more of it, then compresses it into signs, sign forms, and creates, from the biosphere, creates what later on at the Tartu school they call the semiosphere. So in order to be semiotically fit, to be biologically fit, you need a living and vibrant biosphere, which we may not have anymore. To be semiotically fit, you may need a living and vibrant semiosphere, which we may not have anymore either. So, why the need for this notion? Well, because today there really are different channels of experience. And today, because of that, and because information is hardly as valuably understood as before, perhaps, then what is true and fake knowledge becomes a blur. Need I say more of what's happening in the world today? Are we semiotically fit? It doesn't look like it, does it, from that point of view, but maybe we are. So why McLuhan now? Just a bit of an anecdote with McLuhan. I never really took a course for credit with him. He scared the heck out of me. It's 1965. He was an English professor. But he also gave these experimental courses on media, communications. And one day in class, and I audited his classes, he said, my book, Understanding Media, is going to be reviewed by I think it was Times Magazine or the New York Times. Everybody, read it on this weekend. This is the era before, it was print. I actually went out, bought it, I forget what it was, read it. I've never seen such a negative, devastating review in my life. Next morning in class, he says, did you read that? Isn't it great? And I say, well, I'm not sure. He said, I got noticed. Wow. So by a negative review, put him on, and he got discussed and so on. So information, even information that is then communicated negatively, is crucial to who we are. Here's his basic idea, and that is relevant. We make tools, all kinds of tools, physical and mental and emotional and artistic. We all know that, but here's what he added. We make them because they amplify the body. They extend it. Simple example. The wheel amplifies our ability to, at locomotion. Oh, go faster and farther. The telescope amplifies the ability of the eye to see further. The computer amplifies the brain's ability to store information. And I guess he wasn't around with the internet, but he certainly seemed to have prophesized it in a way, allows us to be in constant contact with each other. Talk about the history of communication. From putting it on cave walls and using doves to carry it or carrier pigeons to click today. Wow. Have we ever amplified the ability of the human language, the voice, to extend itself into the world? And if there's anything else, or should I say nothing else that you can take away from McLuhan, because it's hard to take away stuff from McLuhan. Have you ever read them? It's a kaleidoscope. It's a bunch of aphorisms, as is Giambattista Vico, by the way. He put it together almost like a Dadaesque collage painting or pastiche. In fact, his first book on the Mechanical Bride is taken from, a pre-Dadaesque painter, whose name now escapes me. No, doesn't matter. It's not good to get old, guys. Believe me, your mind forgets this. Yes, it's very hard to do it. He was really cool for his era, though. In the counterculture era, McLuhan made his mark. As the paradigm shift was occurring, which scares me now, why didn't it remain, that paradigm shift? McLuhan became relevant. We do live in a kaleidoscopic, pastiche, collage world. It's not linear anymore. It's not alphabetic anymore. In fact, I had the privilege, the honor, to write a book on emoji. And it was relevant to that. And when I was asked this by the publisher Bloomsbury because of the editor, Paul Buisac, at first I thought about it, and I said, I know nothing about emoji. Never used it, never will. Then I started to think about it, and I got students in my own class to give me their text messages. This proves a lot of things of living in the age of McLuhan. I got 323 text messages. Some of these are love messages, obscene messages. Never in my wildest imagination would I have given a professor of mine one of my love letters. Well, I got them. And it told me there has been a paradigm shift. The movement in Dada, the movement in futurism, which predicted all of this, has filtered its way down compressively into the way we now communicate with each other. It's quite interesting, I thought to myself. I need to digress a little bit and give you what McLuhan meant by amplification. You may know it. If you do, humor me or indulge me. When the alphabet came into being and made the encoding and the preservation of information very efficient, because with what? Maybe 30 symbols or characters, you can write any word over and over in all kinds of words. And therefore, storage becomes easier and easier to do. The basic communicative gestalt of the period, based on a tribal view, even in the early civilizations, orality, as he called it, gave way to literacy. And it started to take on enormous value. But what did literacy do? Well, especially when much later on technology, print technology, mass print technology in the late 1400s, made literacy objects, such as books, available cheaply and to everyone, it became a value. And at that time, schooling and the whole world changed. But it also changed us cognitively. Here's his point. What it did is that because people read alone, then they develop a sense of individualism. And the brain becomes more and more in need of being private, individualized. Our law systems change. Privacy and the individual identity. There's no idea of identity in the ancient world. There's selfhood. But identity as we understood it, that's a product of the alphabetic print age revolution. And in fact, identity has its own problems of a psychological nature. So it generates a whole industry, a cottage industry in psychology, and on and on and on. He's right. Technology does change us. Now, he said, at the same time as it amplifies, a technology, however, always retrieves the past. So the book did encourage and brought about movements such as the Enlightenment, the Protestant Reformation, which is based on individualism. But at the same time, because a lot of people wrote the same book, read the same book, I should say, it encouraged them to form a community. So he divided the brain into two parts. Let's call it the individualist brain. I'm on my own. I have my values. I deserve it, a kind of meanness. My ideas are as good as anybody else's, which of course in Vico, that's the age of equality. And then the communal brain. I'll follow my leader. I want to be part of a communal thought. He got this notion a little bit from a Catholic philosopher named Teilhard de Chardin, who came up with the idea of the noosphere, N-O-O sphere, whereby technology would lead us in such a way to think that we all had the same thought at the same time, as in a community. Now, good. This morning, I got an email, 2 emails from China. Unthinkable that I could have had that kind of correspondence even 20 years ago. But now, it's almost banal. In fact, if you don't get it, you say, what's happening? Doesn't anybody know I'm here anymore? If you don't get text messages, oh, have I been isolated? That's the effects of the communal brain. You need to be a part of others. But it's a bizarre form because you live as if you're living in a village, and in fact, McLuhan call it the virtual global village, the electronic global village. But unlike the real villages where people actually physically discussed things, where the body was there, where they even got into physical conflicts right there and then. Right now, and the orality meant I belong to this community, the tribe. Now, the community is virtual. And so conflicts are much more global. It's almost scary, isn't it, to look at the world and say that perhaps changes, social evolutionary changes, are really brought about by ourselves. And that leads me to a notion that I really like from biology, which comes from Maturana and Varela in a marvelous 1976 book. Their notion is called autopoiesis. I don't even know if I can pronounce it wrong. That at least most organisms, and not all organisms, contribute basically, okay, I'm reducing it enormously, but for the sake of convenience, I'm doing this. They participate in the revolution, and there are not blind forces of evolution at stake, which means that there is an interaction between body, mind, and environment. So there's not a blind hand leading us on. That, especially in the human species, autopoiesis, evolution occurs through our objects, through, therefore, technology, through systems of objectification, and object, I'm sorry to use a bit of an academic term here, in the Peircean sense of it has meaning above and beyond it. It becomes an interpretant, and an interpretant of ourselves, of who we are. I have to give you this anecdote. I've been depressed for the last 2 years in teaching, but not anymore. And I'll give you the reason why, because it deals with the age of McLuhan. I've always, and someone took Vic 120 with me here, right? You know me, even at the, I want contact with my students, even if it's a monologue. I need that contact, I need it. Yeah, I'm a bit of a ham. I agree. But I like what I do. And I get very serious about it. And I really like to be with students. I do. I really do. So my classes are usually quite interactive. And I will go around and say, what do you think? Instant talk. In fact, I can't stop them from talking. But for the last 2 years, I got the feeling that the students were more interested in looking at screens than at my face. I thought, they're distant. They're disembodied. I'm coming to it. I'm not critical, believe me, because I've changed my mind. And so I said to myself, well, I still get paid. Doesn't matter. At the end of the year, this year, the end of the academic year, which is beginning of April, one class in particular, a morning class at 9 o'clock, made up of 36 students. At best, I would get 20 to come, at best. And those 20, if I never looked at me, just, I'm sure they weren't just taking notes down. And in some cases, say, would you like to answer this? No, I don't. Okay, go ahead. No, I don't. There was always one guy at the back, anxious to answer. Fine. I was depressed. I have never gotten such a positive review of the course as I got from those people. And here was one of the comments. This was, to me, the best ever course I did because it made me think. And it will probably change me. I met that student in a summer course I'm teaching, and he says, I now refuse to be on Facebook. I haven't given up Twitter yet. I don't know why. And other media. He says, his words, I've reacquired my body a little bit. It's interesting because in this case, the Umwelt, technical term meaning the outside world, I'll use McLuhan's term of the medium, if we like, has truly influenced the Innenwelt, what's inside my mind, the models that I have. That's normal. That's what happens all the time. It really does. But what I've noticed, and it's happened to me, a form of, let's call it, technological addiction. Honestly, if I send a text to one of the members of the Semiotones, whom you're going to hear tomorrow night, and I don't get an instant answer, then I'm going to phone. I need to get you now. Or, is something wrong? Do you not like me anymore? You understand what I'm getting at? It's a kind of stir craziness. And I'm not critical of it because I think students have always been students. People have always been people. But when you look at evolution, there's evolution, but there also could be mutation. And I'm taking this from McLuhan himself, who really, he used pop culture. He used comic books and other things to make his point, and then turned around and said, I hate it, because it could lead to a diminishment of reflection. He says philosophy may disappear, and it may be, and taken over by sciences such as psychology, and God help us, cognitive science, which someone defined as semiotics with money. You know, this is intuitively compelling. I can't prove this. I feel it. I sense it. But as a semiotician, you see it in the signs. You see it in the way we exchange them, we create them. Certainly the linear form of processing information is gone. It's gone. And those who do it, such as myself, are either privileged, like never before. I mean, I get admired for doing my job. It's never have happened in the counterculture era. I would have been challenged enormously. What a sense of power. I don't really want it, but it's there. Or you're marginalized because, well, it's not relevant to what's in today. Actually, I should quote my granddaughter. We were discussing at dinner table. She's coming to U of T into engineering science. And she's into the arts, by the way, loves them. And we were talking about artificial intelligence. It's gonna happen. Artificial intelligence doing everything. It's going to drive our cars and so on. So she made this statement to me and caught me off guard. She says, what does it matter if you're murdered by a human or artificial intelligence? Still murder, isn't it? Then I said, yeah, but how do you punish artificial intelligence? You can punish the other one. And that opens up a whole can of worms that I really didn't want to get into. We argued for 3 hours. Why punish? Why this? Why that? An amazing debate is surreptitiously, unconsciously evolving. And it's the ricorso della storia, as Vivko called it. It scared the heck out of me because we could be trying to recapture, meaning fitness. And that comes about by engagement with the arts, engagement with what makes meaning. You know, I really think that it's the media, artists, cineasts, not memes. I became interested in meme culture, very much so, because meme culture is powerful, but it doesn't last long. It's a kind of nano culture. Although I kind of like the word meme because it's, you know, an idea comes up and then it goes into other organisms. Then other organisms work on it and develop it and set it on. Maybe discovery works that way. Who knows? But what's wrong with the word sign? You see, meme is probably information that does not need interpretation, whereas sign probably does. It kind of impels us to interpret it because it has a history behind it, a historical flow. And while the historical flow does revolve and go into cycles, it's there. Again, I'll go to my grandson. We were listening to, grandson, not granddaughter. We were listening to music on the radio, and I said, let me put on Beethoven. He said, no, that's old stuff. He loves it now, by the way. I said, really? Then you shouldn't be speaking English to me. Why? Because you're using old words. You can't cut. You cannot sever the tie with the past. So McLuhan became fascinated by the book. What an interesting object. You hold it in your hands. It's like carrying knowledge around. I remember, nobody does anymore. Now you carry devices. I carry them too, and you're touching them, whatever. But I remember having a book in your hand meant, you must be engaged with meaning. And even if you weren't reading it, it's an object. It's a sign of what you yourself think you are. It has always been, for me, a metaphor of knowledge. It's not knowledge itself. Knowledge is something else, although it can be contained there, a rectangular container. What an interesting metaphor. It is a text, of course, and textuality probably dictates how we interact with each other. Yes, this connected intelligence is a very interesting notion, but textuality has already been there in semiotics, including intertextuality, perhaps allotextuality. But the book, that object, because you could carry it with you, is what made individualism a reality. And from that, and let me quote McLuhan on this, the portability of the book, like that of easel painting, added much to the new culture of individualism. Absolutely. So in the age of McLuhan, we're losing our individualism. It's not a value anymore. You can see it in many symptomatic ways. Perhaps who cares if people put themselves on Facebook to be read by anyone and everyone. That's not individualism. That's communalism. These two brains are at work. They're at work in education. I've never seen it so much at work as in education, because that's my field. In 1965, he actually said there will be a day when education within walls will disappear and it will have a wall-less classroom. That doesn't mean that it won't occur in a physical space, but that it just doesn't occur within that container, and that because of technology, it branches outward. And so literacy today is an issue for linguists, for educators, for everyone. What is literacy? My PhD is not in semiotics. I was actually brought over to the semiotics program by, as I mentioned, Professor Buisa. My PhD is in Italian linguistics. I know, sounds insane, but that's what I did in. And for many years, I always considered language, grammar, meaning through a new code, through a new medium, as the be-all of education. And after all, it opens up the world to great books in that language, in any language, if you're a teacher of languages. It amplifies your linguistic abilities. It connects you communally to a society that you would never have before thought of connecting in a more direct way, rather than just as a tourist. It was an amazing experience for me. Well, language courses are almost all decimated. If people do take language courses, it's online for a specific reason. What a shame, I thought to myself. I always disliked, by the way, don't get angry at me. I dislike literary criticism. Sorry, Peter. What a waste of time. So much gibberish. You may as well be reading, Estragon and Vladimir and waiting for Gadol. Probably you're better off. Well, I take it back. We need that kind of discourse. We need a kind of elaborate, and let me go back to Italian, because Italian, like many of the Romance languages, had I thought was a very complex, abstruse, rhetorical, and syntactic structure with many embedded clauses. I was in awe when I heard professors of Italian talk. I just stood there as a neophyte. I would stay there and try to imitate them, from 12-sentence mean average of an English sentence to about 18, 25. My sentences got bigger and bigger to emulate this style. The average sentence, and I did research on it, of an announcer on Rai TV in Italy today is 8 words. Okay? The average sentence in a text of, or in journals and that, and again, I have a friend in Israel who helps me do that, Yair Neumann, as you know. He develops software. This is great. 10 words. It's gone. This compression of information, this compression of form, going back to McLuhan, has changed the way we decode meaning, the way we unpack it. There's nothing wrong with it. Mathematicians have done it since the beginning of time. They compress so much meaning in a formula, and even in a superscript, you know, the exponential superscript. It allows you to take so much information, bring it down, and encode it. And isn't that semiosis? So, my conclusion. Are we fit? I don't know. I'm not copying out. I'm saying that we're in a transitional period. We're in a paradigm shift. I never felt a paradigm shift in my own life as much as this. I love it because I'm still around. I still teach. I'm in the paradigm shift. And at the same time, and here's my conclusion, here it is. Retrieving the past, that was McLuhan's idea, has value. I'm going to say something that I probably shouldn't say, but I think that's why the semiotones are popular. Let me give you an example. Because it's retrieving a style of music that's not there anymore. And who are our fans? They're 20-year-olds, not 80-year-olds. They call it vintage music. Whoa, I like that an awful lot. But think about it. Never in the history of my own life would a 71-year-old man be on a stage with a 20-year-old and make music of a popular era. That's what McLuhan meant by retrieval. Age differences are gone. I'm not sure that's always that good. Because wisdom, where is it? Who do I go to? Wikipedia, maybe? I don't know. In other words, McLuhan's basic point was, and I think it's right, the medium is the message. We must take our forms and shape them. That's what's missing, in my view, from McLuhan. In other words, he was missing the idea of the interpretant. It's constantly ongoing. The way we deal with information, the way we package it and unpack it, sorry for these metaphors, is all about interpretation. What a lesson I've learned from this. We are interpreters, constant interpreters. If we have leaders in the communal brain who shape interpretation, even if it's fake news, we're living in a very unfit world. But we're becoming fit again, in my view. Because Tom Wolfe, brilliant writer, he says, listen to McLuhan. Please read him. And let me conclude with his remarks. Because suppose he's right, then what? Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Marcel. One takeaway I have for sure is that I need to read Vico. If it's all right with you, we're going to open to the floor for some questions. Olivia is going to bring the mic around, and just anybody who wants to ask.
It's always hard, isn't it? What am I going to say? We could do this over. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. a question from an Italian. Oh, it's quite nice to hear you speak, because I wrote from you so much at university, for example, in Bologna, where you are quite popular.
Good. You listen to the semitones in Bologna?
This is reality. Just a question about the weight and the impact media have on our contemporary society. I work as a consultant, and I also research a bit on this, on retail space. And I read so much about retail space, semiotic analysis and blah, blah, blah. And I see that still, even if we are quite aware of the weight and the impact media have on our society compared to other times of recent history, a few decades ago, for example, how media as retail space are so often analyzed and approached as pictures. From a visual point of view first, but even when plastic semiotics is applied, behavioral semiotics is applied, I see that so much importance is given on the text, while the meaning comes from the use of the text. And so we spend so much time decoding labels which are not appropriate because the semantics of the word evokes other questions, other notions, but in fact what counts is the use we make of this. And media are so much about behaviors and use. Do you feel the same lack of attention on this?
No, I agree. You've expressed it very eloquently. You know, McLuhan and others said that we need all our bodily senses in order to make meaning, all of them. I guess the word sensorium comes to mind. And he said, you know, we're all born with equally calibrated senses. And you can see children, right? They pick up things, look at them, taste them, and so on. We soon learn, depending on the dominant medium in the culture, and ours is visual, has been for a long time, that we learn, or at least that medium conditions us to process information through that sensory modality above the others. In cultures where reading and text is not as important, as for example gangs, you listen to the voice, and the voice has great impact on you. So what happens probably today, and you know, these very sexy research studies on multimediality and multimodality, what they're really trying to say, in my view, is we're trying to recalibrate our senses in some way, in an artificial way. You're absolutely right. Do we really have texts in our mind unless we have been conditioned to process the world through texts? Does, let's say, a non-textual person, someone who's never gone to school, process it that way, or does it process it on the tones of the human voice? I'm not sure of olfactory cultures, but I can imagine a world where olfaction is strong in interpreting media. So sure, it's the way the medium adopts the sensory style, the sensory mode, and then rechannel it to create its texts. And in our case, it's images. Images. From the beginning, imagery for us is crucial in psychology. It probably outdoes, I'm not a psychologist, but it probably outdoes all studies on, I don't know, the voice and so on. You know, there was a movement a few years back that I helped found, actually. I was there. I'm not bragging. I was there. It was in Tallinn, Chris, when people said, let's found a movement called vocal semiotics based on voice and vocal anthropology. And I said, sure, let's do it. And nothing came out of it. I don't think we care that much. We want to read, we want to see rather than hear constantly. That raises a few questions, though, because we do listen. We listen to music. We listen to other things, you know, speeches and so on. And the voice is more powerful, in my view, than the image and the text. Much more powerful. And if you want, using a McLuhan notion that things like tweets and profiles are nothing but secondary forms of orality, speech that is rather oral, not linearly and textual and organized in some way, then you see where we're getting at. Maybe there is a retrieval of the sensorium in a bizarre way. That's a very good notion you came up with there that I didn't think about. I don't always think of everything, but that was a very, very good notion, that of usage, because that's basically Peircean semiotics that says meaning comes by using it. And then he went right, interpret, and then you're back to the original sign, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Use.
Hi. There's two related questions, very related to the first one. Do you think that the language that you think in affects how you see the world?
Mm-hmm.
And then related to emojis, as emojis become prevalent, how do you see them influencing how we see the world?
You're a person after my heart. Because those are the two areas I can talk about. First of all, yeah, I do think that language does influence thought. It's called, in anthropology and linguistics, the Whorfian hypothesis. Goes back to Humboldt, probably even before. Certainly Vico maintained it. But not in a deterministic way. It simply means that my brain, if I speak English, attends to certain concepts that are there, which may not be there if I speak another language. And this is why when gaps occur, there's borrowing, there's paraphrasing, and things of that nature. Now, the work of George Lakoff on this is actually instrumental in my view, because if the concepts are associative, rather than strictly semantic in the sense, the original sense of hierarchical, organized according to bits and pieces, if they are associative, and you're into that, how can I call it, that network of associations, then your thought is being shaped by it. As you navigate through it, as I'm doing it right now, then you feel the meaning differently, you conceptualize it differently. But at the same time, it doesn't block meaning from occurring across languages. In fact, some of the recent research in what they now call cognitive semantics, I'm not sure that's a good name for it, but it's a sexy name, is that there are some universal metaphors. It's in the details, it's in the specific linguistic metaphors that come out. So almost all cultures seem to have the idea of a journey in life. But it's the way we then articulate it and then symbolize it, ritualize it, that is the difference. I tried to actually metaphor brought me over to Vic in the first place. So absolutely, it's there. As for emoji, boy, they pack so much meaning, don't they? You know, the cliche, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is so much true in this case. Because, but you know what I've noticed, and you should buy my book, by the way, because they're not distributed right, they're not decoration. At first I thought they were. They're not. They have certain specific functions, uses. One of them is the phatic function, which comes from Malinowski and then Jakobsen. So in order to start off a message or to close it, you do use emojis in a strategic way, and they form a kind of system, a way of saying hi and bye. Let's leave it at that without reducing it enormously. In fact, I get text messages from the members of the band. I need to, because although a professor from students are unusual. If, and this has happened, there's a singer in particular, she always ends with a smiley. Sometimes 30 of them. The one time that she didn't, I called her right away. Something wrong. And then something was wrong, not serious. Got it? So there is a phatic function. There are many other. It's emotive. and so on. But there's also, what I found strange, a kind of syntax. And it's definitely not Chomskyan. It is a kind of visual syntax that is guided probably, if I would go back and write the book, I would expand this section by conceptual metaphors, which guide the text making and then the selection of the emoji. Now, there are a lot of things happening with emoji that also surprised me. For example, they are now subject to ambiguity. I mean, that goes contrary to the original idea. A smiley is a smiley. Well, it isn't anymore. It could be an ironic sign. It could be something else. Got it? So it has become epigenetic. Epigenetic, it's changing as a natural language is. I also have a strong feeling, I concluded this way, that perhaps it may be a passing, not so much of a fad, but a style. But let me tell you why. As the technology changes, maybe the way we create texts may change as well, and emoji may have served its functions, okay? But I'm not sure that visualization will disappear very soon. I think that's become, for a little while, part of it all, part of how we do things, how we write. And if you just write an alphabetic text and a long one, my guesses are people won't even read all of it. They'll skim through it. Got it? So emoji just compresses it. It comes up at the right time. You misplace an emoji, you're in trouble. And your whole text will go off. Huh? So it does have a kind of holistic form. A philosopher named Suzanne Langer called it has a presentational form rather than a completely discursive or discrete form of presentation. Maybe he can ask.
Thanks, Marcel, for a great keynote to kick us off. Great to see you. I wanted to pick up on something you said. I love the, you talked about, I've got a quote from you about the kaleidoscopic Dadaist age we're living in, and I think that really does describe the choppiness of how we flip from one browser to another and how we flip from one medium to another, Instagram, Twitter, for the younger members of the crowd, Snapchat, I guess, Facebook. But I also wanted to ask you about something you said very early on. You talked about how we'd become diffused into cyberspace as a result of our amplification. And obviously, McLuhan talked about extension of nervous systems. Do you relate that in some way to our semiotic fitness? Is that why you have concerns about how semiotic fit? Because you never really defined what you understand by semiotic fitness. Can you link those two things?
Oh, absolutely. Fitness simply means reacquiring your body for semiosis. That's it, period. I mean, you may have to ask Stephanie to redefine it. But to me, it means if you've lost your body through semiosis, it's through cyberspace or wherever it is, you're going to be looking for it, finding almost bizarre ways to get it back. And that may make us temporarily unfit until we get that body back. This is why the movement called, oh God, what's it? The singularity that's coming up. What's his name? Kurzweil. I actually got into an extreme argument with one of his students at a TEDx talk. He was here, and I said, "Where are you from?" He says, by the way, the singularity is, I think it's the year 20-something.
46.
2026, where artificial intelligence will overtake human intelligence. And he's from, and I said, "What university are you from?" I'm not making this up, from Singularity University in California, really. Okay. And what are you going to talk about? I'm going to talk about how it's going to be over for, we're better off with machines than with humans. Okay, well, we almost got into a real fight at that time. Fortunately, there was a lot of beer, so it helped. I also got almost into another fight with someone else at Oxford, by the way, when I was there with an Elsevier encyclopedia, who was a Chomsky semanticist who said, semiotics, nonsense. It's not science, it's not. I said, does everything have to be scientific, whatever that means, for it to be valuable? What the heck is this about? What's wrong with you guys? I think what's happening here is a need to bring things back and to control them, okay? Because right now it is diffuse. So maybe by allowing artificial intelligence to organize, and boy, does it ever organize. If you want an organizational system, it's not humans. It's a human product, the artificial intelligence. As we become more and more reliant on that to do our organization, and as we navigate cyberspace for the hell of navigating it, we may become semiotically unfit. That is the point, yeah. That's the subtext of what I was getting at. However, I'm a Vickian. I like Giambattista Vico, who said there's a ricorso, the imagination, the fantasia. You can't knock it down, and we may be reinventing ourselves right now in a way that I wish I could come back in the year 2098 and see what kind of semiotic animal, to use the term in semiotic fitness, we have become. Yeah. Done? Done. Thank you.